Hello, everybody. Welcome to Preserving Your Past, tips on storing and handling family collections, a video series we're doing for our website in conjunction with the American Library Association's Preservation Week. My name is Becky Geller, and I'm a librarian at Newburyport Public Library, and I work with both circulating and special collections. I have a background in preservation, and before coming to the Newburyport Public Library, I used to help institutions like libraries and archives care for their collections. And now that I'm working for the public again, I've taken the preservation concepts used by cultural heritage communities and made them applicable to a home audience. My goal is to make preservation practical for everyone who has materials that they want to save. In this video, I'll be talking about the supplies that will help you care for your family heirlooms and collections. And I'll start with the preservation approach to storing and handling your collections at home, and then talk about some important terms when it comes to archival quality supplies that you'll need to store and handle your collections safely. And then in the next video, we'll go through the types of things that you might have by category with specific tips on each category for proper storage, handling, and use. And then I'll end each video with a recap that will include some resources where you can find supplies and some further information. And because I'm framing everything through the lens of preservation, it behooves us to understand what I mean by preservation and how we do it practically and at home. Preservation is a set of practices and planning to minimize damage and deterioration in collections. One of the large-scale, big picture aspects of preservation is managing the environment that surrounds your materials. By maintaining a decent environment, your collections are starting at a baseline of good protection from deteriorating factors like heat and humidity and so on. Another large aspect of preservation is the way our materials are handled and stored, which is what we'll be talking about today. And with some planning and good storage strategies, we can prevent a lot of damage due to accidents and incidents. And that's what we'll be talking about in this video and the next. The next 2 points on this slide start to cross over with some collections management issues, which is a big part of what librarians and archivists do. And there are some principles there that work quite well for managing collections at home. Identifying the types of materials that you have at home helps you make decisions about how to best care for those items. Prioritizing items by the level of care that they truly need will help you make decisions about what to tackle first and what can make do with less attention for longer. And finally, here on the slide, librarians and archivists are all very, very concerned with providing access to collections that they manage. By caring for your own collections, you're providing your future self and future generations access to your things for as long as possible. So preservation and access really go hand in hand. So how do you do all of this at home? Well, one of the biggest benefits you can provide your collections is through managing the environment where they're stored. That's that temperature, the humidity level, light, even air quality and housekeeping. And in tandem with that, we can prevent a lot of accidental tears, creases, and general damage, also called mechanical damage, by storing and handling our things properly. I'd like to point out the last point on the slide here too, that's seeking advice from professionals. Many conservators and preservation professionals are happy to answer basic questions and give advice for free. At Newburyport Public Library, we're happy to help with these types of questions through our archival center. So please feel free to give us a call, send us an email, or make an appointment to come in. We're always happy to help. So I mentioned that term mechanical damage on the previous slide, and it's the major issue that we're trying to prevent through safe storage, handling, and use. The photographic print we see here on this slide is a great example of a photo that has been overhandled and underprotected. The edges are creased and worn and torn. There's a crack through the right third of the photo that's probably the result of folding and flattening the photo. My guess is that this photo is probably carried around in someone's pocket or wallet, and it was pulled out frequently to look at and to show others. At this point, the photo could be placed in a crystal clear polyester sleeve, which would keep it flat and also protect it from further tears and creases, and hold the whole thing together in case any parts are starting to come off or peel off. I wouldn't recommend returning it to a wallet at this point, just to keep it a little bit better protected. And that's to say that by providing a good storage solution, that polyester sleeve, we are protecting the photo from further mechanical damage. So continuing with the damaged photo example, the polyester sleeve that I mentioned is a key part of protective storage and allowing for safe handling and display. It's also a great example of the types of archival supplies that we can use to preserve our family collections. So what makes a material archival quality? Well, just like the term natural at the supermarket, labeling something as archival doesn't necessarily mean that it meets any particular standard of quality. So instead, you want to look for additional terms like the ones you see here on this slide to help determine whether a supply is truly worthy of protecting your collections. Archival supplies for storage enclosures are generally made from paper or plastic, and you'll see different terms for each of those with a little bit of overlap. So for paper, you want to be looking for acid-free, and that means that it has a neutral pH at the time of manufacture. It's not a lifetime guarantee for the product. Make sure this is in combination with another designation such as lignin-free, which I'm going to talk about now. Lignin-free means that the wood pulp lignin in the paper has been washed away, ensuring the neutral pH at the time of manufacture for a longer period of time. Some other terms that you might see include buffered. That means that the paper is imbued with an alkaline substance, increasing the pH and providing additional protection against acidity, which is responsible for a lot of deterioration. So it's kind of nice to have that buffer and keep your paper materials neutral or slightly alkaline for a little longer. I do want to note that buffered paper is not always the best option for all of your things. Some photographic formats like blueprints and cyanotypes and some animal-derived textiles like silk and wool do not like that slightly alkaline environment. So I recommend using buffered archival supplies for almost everything else, but you want to avoid those certain formats. And then when it comes to plastic supplies, you want to look for terms like inert, which means that it's free of plasticizers, vinyl, and PVC. There won't be any off-gassing. So some examples of inert plastics include polyester, polypropylene, and polyethylene. You also want to look for a term called the PAT test or the photographic activity test. And that means it's been tested for safe use with photographic materials. Paper materials can have this designation as well, but you'll see it most frequently with plastic materials. And an easy way to ensure that the supplies you're getting are of good quality is to purchase from a reputable company. The top two online suppliers nationwide are Gaylord Archival and Hollinger Metal Edge. And I'll talk more about them at the end. I have a whole list for you of different types of or different companies that offer archival supplies that are reputable, so you can know that you're starting at a good point when it comes to purchasing these supplies. Many of the mainstays of archival supplies are made from archival paper. Archivists most frequently group documents together in folders, label that folder, and then arrange those folders in a paper box. This is called processing and rehousing, and it provides the basis for the archival theory of arrangement and description. At home, it's certainly more than sufficient to place important papers in folders or sleeves or envelopes and then organize those units in boxes that match the dimensions of the folders, sleeves, or envelopes. For example, if you are using letter-sized folders, you want the box you're keeping those folders in to accommodate letter-sized folders without being too big or too small, and without being under or overstuffed in that box. Matching the dimensions of your materials that way really prevents items from sliding around or slumping if a box is too big, and from getting crumpled or smashed if the box is too small. And this is very important. I used to conduct site visits and consult with libraries and archives, and I saw a lot of items sliding around in too big boxes and drawers and being bent and warped to fit into smaller spaces. So it's a very natural human instinct to try to make the things that you have work, but be paying attention and try to match those dimensions as best you can. The other major category are those plastic-based enclosures. Polyester sleeves that I mentioned before when I was talking about mechanical damage are certainly plastic, and they're being shown here on the slide. They're perfect for visual materials like photographs and any single piece documents that you want to be able to handle and view readily. The drawback to individual plastic sleeves, like polyester sleeves, is that they add up in both cost and weight. Many of us are likely to have photos that we want to save in our family collections, and really a whole lot of them. If each one was sleeved individually, this would be very bulky and heavy and expensive. And if you have the space, that's a very lovely way to protect photos, but definitely plan for the extra expense and the bulk before diving into a project like that. And besides single item sleeves, there are also multi-item plastic album pages that provide a lot of great protection. And they also make visual collections easy to see and use, and fit easily into a photo album binder or folders for really good space-saving storage. Plastic supplies come in other forms too. You might see large single sheet documents and large photos that can be enclosed in a custom sized sheet of polyester that's been heat sealed to another sheet to create a custom envelope. And it's perfectly clear, it's great for display and offers a lot of good protection, just like the smaller version of that. It's a really wonderful way to keep large flat documents and photos, but it's those enclosures are best made by professionals who have the space and equipment to do the work. It can require that heat sealer, which is tough to come across. And when you're dealing with oversized sheets of polyester and oversized items, it really does require a lot of space that not very many of us are likely to have at home. Aside from enclosures, there are a few other tools that you might consider purchasing to care for your collections. The first category here are the supplies for very light and gentle surface cleaning to lift off dirt or dust or particulates. If you're interested in cleaning your materials yourself, I recommend learning how and when to do it first to ensure that you won't be accidentally causing any damage. I wouldn't recommend trying out any liquid solutions, like rinsing your materials in water or soaking a surface with alcohol. Even if a YouTuber says it's okay, I'd be too nervous about damaging my materials permanently. So I can't confidently recommend that you do anything involving alcohol or water or any other solvent. And the Northeast Document Conservation Center, or NEDCC, in nearby Andover, Massachusetts, has a great leaflet on this topic, and it's available for free on their website. I've listed it at the end as well, if you're interested in learning more about surface cleaning. I personally find surface cleaning to be very satisfying and calming, but it's also important to know that while gentle surface cleaning can make a noticeable difference, it won't make your materials look perfectly clean or brand new. So you have to manage your expectations a little bit there. And then I'll talk about the other tools I've listed here on the slide, the cleaning supplies. After the cleaning supplies that can make your handling and storage of things a little easier, such as a micro spatula, which is indeed a tiny metal spatula that can help you lift brittle pages. I've also listed a bone folder here, which can make box and folder assembly easier. If you notice mustiness in your collections, or perhaps you have some cigarette odor lingering in your collections, book and paper deodorizer can be effective in removing the smell before you store your materials for safekeeping. And then gloves, I'll talk a little bit more about in just a moment. As a good general rule and a good starting point, we want to use acid-free, lignin-free, and usually buffered paper-based enclosures to store most of the types of materials that you might have at home, in folders, in boxes. This includes photographs too, if you'd like. An entirely paper enclosure system is likely to be lighter in weight and less expensive. If not readily viewable, be much more difficult to take out that one photo and look at it very quickly if it's all on paper. However, you still want to use paper products that pass the photographic activity test, or the PAT that I mentioned before. If you're shopping for supplies and see a paper product that would be perfect for your photo storage project, but you don't see the PAT mentioned, go ahead and ask the supplier if it's safe to use with photographs. Most likely it will be, it just maybe hasn't been tested yet, so they can't officially put the notice or the seal on their website. However, as I mentioned before, polyester sleeves are a really great way for to store collections that you want to be able to handle and view very easily. And they're also great at protecting materials from direct handling, such as fingerprints and any sort of abrasion that might happen. Polyester sleeves work so well and stay closed because of static cling rather than tape or glue. And you want to avoid anything that's marked as anti-static, because that defeats the whole purpose. We're using that static for a good reason. The static is a chemical-free way to keep your photo or papers in place. But because of static, you want to avoid using plastic sleeves with anything friable, like a friable surface. And an example of that would be maybe a pastel drawing or charcoal drawings. And that charcoal or pastel can lift up very easily or get smudged very easily. So that's when the static cling is going to work against us. You probably want to go with a different option to store and display those materials. For many visual materials like photograph collections or perhaps handwritten letters and such, I like a combination of plastic and paper enclosures. Plastic sleeves or album pages for the items themselves, and then I would group those together in paper folders and then organize those folders into a paperboard box. That's my favorite go-to way to organize a collection. So once we have our items sleeved, folded, and boxed, where are we going to put them? The best option for boxes of family collection materials is a shelving unit with smooth, flat shelves that are large enough to fully support the boxes on them. The shelves should also be sturdy enough that they do not bow under the weight of the boxes. Very important. And the same principle applies to any tables that you have if you're lucky enough to have space for those. Or any sort of like map cases or flat storage that you might have. While the picture here does not necessarily look like home storage, more like garage storage, I do like to see that those boxes are fully supported by the shelves, and the owner of these documents are getting a lot of bang for their buck in terms of high density storage. But there are also a few things happening here that I would try to avoid. First, double stacking boxes like this makes them very difficult to retrieve. I'd rather install more shelves in the unit and keep each shelf to one layer of boxes. The second thing that I would like to nitpick a little bit is I imagine this unit could be placed up against a wall. That would probably be where it fits the best, and used kind of like a bookcase. And that means that the boxes that are facing the back are against the wall in my scenario, are very, very difficult to access. And finally, I'd like to see a little more headspace between the boxes and the shelf above them. Again, making access easier. You want to have a little more headspace and room to maneuver. As promised, a little bit about wearing gloves when you're handling collections. And there's a little bit of good news here. You actually don't need to wear gloves with most materials. Having clean, dry hands is perfectly fine, preferably without moisturizer or hand sanitizer freshly applied. Where you want to be diligent is when handling photographic materials and metals. A fingerprint on the image surface of a photo can be permanent, and on metal can mar that metallic sheen also permanently. And then there's the question of whether to use white cotton gloves that you see in archives and libraries, or powder-free nitrile gloves that are readily available and disposable. While you can order the white cotton gloves through an archival supplier, I think it's just easier to pick up a box of nitrile gloves. They're becoming available again. We had a period there where they were not easily available, but I think they're pretty easy to find. They offer a little more dexterity than the white cotton gloves and also tend to have a better fit. So that's about it for this part 1 video of storage and handling. And I want to end with a recap of how I think of preservation at home and provide you with that list of well-known archival suppliers that I mentioned. Family collections and heirlooms are the materials that represent our heritage and family history. These materials are unique and often irreplaceable items that need special care and attention. All materials deteriorate and break down over time as they're exposed to the environment and as they're handled and stored. To slow the process of deterioration, we can manage the way we use our heirlooms and the environment in which they are stored. Preservation practices are the ways in which we can care for our collections and ensure access to them for as long as possible. So here we have on the screen some suppliers. I mentioned Gaylord Archival that you'll see in Hollinger Metal Edge. All of these other companies, archival products and university products, are both great. If you're looking specifically for boxes, which I'll talk about more in the next video, a great place to get custom sized boxes is from the CMI microclimates. And I didn't quite mention AIC's Find a Professional tool yet. That stands for the American Institute for Conservation. But if you're looking for a professional to get advice from or to do some work for you, that's a great place to find well-vetted professionals. And then I did mention the surface cleaning leaflet from NEDCC, and that's where to find that. All right, and thank you so much for watching. And again, in the next video, I'll talk more about using all of these supplies with the various types of materials that you might have at home in your family collections, and offer some storage and handling tips for each one. And that wraps us up for today. Thank you so much.